Hi, and welcome to my presentation. My topic is From Workplace to Classroom, Workplace Skill Development and Continuing Education. My name is Jennifer Panelides, and this is for Education 5401. So let me give you a quick introduction of my topic and how I came to be. So I'm currently looking for work, and I've been looking for work for some time now, and the idea of workplace skills is something that often comes up. Do I need to upgrade my skills? Do I need to get more experience in a certain area? Do I need to become more experienced in a certain area to be considered a professional? And so I really wanted to explore the idea of workplace skills. And what kind of skills are the workplaces looking for? How are these skills developed? Who's training people in these skills? And how do university and colleges fit into workplace development for mature and already workplace individuals? We know that colleges and institutions provide those degrees and diplomas to students, but how do they sort of work in conjunction with workplace development? Who trains it, and ultimately who trains employees? One of the most common things that we get asked often is jobs require 1 to 3 years experience. But how do you get the 1 to 3 years experience? How do you get these skills in this industry if no one's willing to teach you or train you? And this is something heard sort of across the board with students. So one of the things I've sort of discovered is that organizations want to seek job-ready candidates. It is that idea that you're starting a job regardless of your experience with already knowledge and skills in that area. And what are the reasons behind the need to have job-ready employees? We can hypothesize that there's a few reasons. It could be the economy, of course. There's time. There's organizations' inability to sort of commit to employees and employees' inability to sort of stay loyal to organizations. Currently, we kind of live in a gig society, and that's often talked about. The idea that people don't really have that sort of loyalty to one organization. But on the reverse, organizations hire individuals on contracts. And so there's sort of that push and pull from both sides. And Capelli talks about if organizations are sort of unwilling to teach them, as in the employees, educational institutions will have to pick up the slack because employees need to gain skills somewhere. And this is a great opportunity, though, for universities and colleges to capitalize on that changing workplace. So it provides a new market or a new student that universities and colleges might not have previously been able to sort of bring in. So there's some issues, of course, with this idea. And that's that the workplace skill development becomes the responsibility of the student. And while I think it is important, obviously, that we should all sort of develop our own skills, what happens then is that if a student wants to sort of get a job, they have to go seek these skills outside of the workplace. And it's this idea that your workplace isn't going to build you up to create more skills to do the job better, but that you have to take down that responsibility. It also brings up some questions about how private corporations are run very differently than public institutions. However, public institutions are the ones that are sort of taking over this idea of developing workplace skills. So private corporations obviously are run with the bottom line intact, but public institutions are run a little bit differently. And so do we have individuals who are working in a public institution training those who are going to go work in a very different corporate environment? There seems to be clear-cut financial benefits, however, for higher education institutions and for corporations, but ultimately, what does the student gain from this? We could say employment. However, it seems like this is a really roundabout way of securing meaningful employment. So are educational institutions necessarily the right way to train adult learners to further develop their workplace skills? Of course, we can say that higher education institutions are great places to sort of get those initial credentials as your degrees or your diplomas. But are they the ones that should be upgrading our skills and giving us those skills that we can develop to be workplace ready? So Capelli's article is quite interesting and talked a lot about this, and he talks about the economy's skill gap and the idea that employers' expectations are sort of out of step with what reality is like right now. Employers complain about schools lacking in prepping future workers, and the idea that, those degrees and those diplomas really don't prep you for the work world. He also says that employers want workers that they don't have to train. Hiring from the outside is more desirable than training and hiring within because you can get a set of skills that you don't have to create and you don't have to train your employees, but you can get in and someone else has done the work or paid for it. And the idea is all behind the potential to do a job versus your current ability to do it. So one of the things that I've run into and I've seen as well is that the idea that they want an employee that can currently do the job. So you're often hiring someone who's maybe even more experienced for the role that they're currently going to take on. And schools can then promise this to employees with their programming. So this offers that door for continuing education and for higher education institutions to create programming so that students can currently go into a role and do the job, versus having to say, I do have the ability to learn if you are willing to train me. So let's take a look a little bit at continuing education, because these are the institutions, these are the sections of institutions that are sort of catering to this new unique student. So advertising for these programs, if you always look at it, they sort of cater to the busy schedule of today's professionals. They don't cater to those 18-year-olds. They cater to professionals who are already working. Education is often sold as a commodity. And this is sold and bought to gain a better job. It's saying, if you do this job, you're going to get this in return. We have to question, is this negative? Is this a bad thing? I'm not sure, and this is sort of where my exploration is coming from this paper. So let's take a quick look at continuing education examples. We have an example here in Mohawk's program. We also have an example here from Humber's program that talks all about continuing education programs to advance their career, explore new fields, pursue a passion. University of Toronto talks about expanding your professional knowledge and skill set in a condensed format designed to fit your schedule. And we have here George Brown, which talks about offering courses in the evening, weekends, days, and online classes to sort of suit that schedule. So again, it's really talking about the professional and allowing someone to continue to work. Here's a testimonial from Durham College, and meet the needs of being a single parent. So as I said, it's really not talking about that 18-year-old, but rather those professionals who want to get the job. And it's really putting the onus on the student. So I ultimately wanted to connect this to a theoretical framework, and I really enjoy Mesereau's transformative learning theory, because it talks all about how adult learners need to have that transformation or that disorienting dilemma to question their sort of beliefs or their truths that they believe exists, and through that sort of disorienting experience is then how they get to learn and further develop themselves and sort of expand their thought process. And I think that this is a really great theory to look at continuing education. So hopefully then I can apply this theory is sort of my goal for the paper. So I question if continuing education is being catered to students, so it's catered to this busy schedule. Does transformative learning actually occur? And this is one of the questions I sort of want to explore. And so in my hopes to sort of write this paper, I've looked a little bit at an argument and exploration. So focus on the workplace skill development utilizing Mesereau's theoretical framework. And I wanted to, as I sort of talked about, distinguish the difference between continuing education and recent grads. This is about continuing education and workplace and professionals seeking more skill development. And it's not necessarily about those who are 18 years old and seeking a diploma or a degree. So I sort of created a little bit of an outline of what I want my argument to be around. And the idea is continuing education fills a needed gap for employers and provides institutions an opportunity to promote lifelong learning and ultimately profit off of the students' inability to be trained on the job. It appears from this that students therefore pay for skill development so that organizations can benefit, which in itself, of course, does not seem positive. It seems very negative. However, I would like to argue that despite the negative association, it does put students in charge of their learning, so it does take an ownership to the students. However, does this conflict with transformative learning? Does it then transformative learning really occur if we're allowing students to sort of cater their skills? So kind of condense that a little bit more is what I'm sort of looking at now, is the rise of skill development outside the workplace helps demonstrate the change in higher education sphere from education for education versus education for work. Transformative learning may not occur because of the nature of the programs. However, we may not be able to apply that theory because the goal of education has changed. Of course, I'm not sure that this is the argument I'm going to necessarily stick with, but this is definitely the area that I'm sort of focusing on. In order to prove this, I want to look at I want to do a quick content analysis and look at the language of programming and then push towards education being for the workplace at two higher education institutions through the lens of transformative learning. I want to look at the quick history of continuing education and how this sort of became prominent, as well as for my extrapolation, look at human resource research. So for the content analysis, I want to examine this through two different institutions. Currently, I'm looking at the University of Toronto and Durham College. I want to understand the history of continuing education and HR exploration. So in this article I found, they talk about the connection between the labor market and continuing education, and sort of understanding that continuing education has historically been for groups who haven't had the privilege of the initial education. So those who haven't had the opportunity to go to get a diploma or a degree, and we sort of think of this as that student coming back, needed to upgrade their skills because they weren't able to get that initial degree because of their gender, because they immigrated, or they migrated to another place because perhaps they didn't have the financial capability when they were that initial age of 18 or younger to get a degree or diploma. Of course, there now is a sort of change and evolution of how it's perceived and expected. It's almost as though everyone goes and gets it. So for this paper, I'd just like to do a quick conclusion. So I'd like to, of course, rewrite and fine-tune this argument. This is the area I'm looking into, but I do think it's a little bit convoluted at this point, and I'm wanting to narrow this down. I want to conduct further research in all three areas I've discussed and condense and summarize, because as I'm sort of talking about this now, it might prove to be too lengthy for a 2,000-word paper, and just ensure that, I'm staying within that word limit. So that's my presentation, continuing education, and looking at the workplace development. I've attached to my works cited on a PDF. Thank you.